Emily, how you doing?
Great, Brian. How are you?
I'm good. I think we probably should give a disclaimer that we both have dogs who are super excited that we're home right now. And because traffic is going on and schools are getting out, the likelihood of barking might happen. So we should just warn everybody. So tell me a little bit about yourself. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you. Well, so I work here at Fairfield University. I teach teachers. I used to teach English. I used to teach English in Philadelphia, where I grew up. But now I'm here in Connecticut raising two adolescents, which is just super fun.
Yeah, youth is wasted on the young. That's what George Bernard Shaw says. Yeah.
What about you, Brian?
So I'm Brian. I also teach at Fairfield University and direct the Connecticut Writing Project. I'm from Syracuse, New York. I taught many years in Louisville, Kentucky, and then did my doctorate and ended up at Fairfield University, where I run summer programs for not only kids, but for teachers as well. And so it's exciting to be able to work with you on this module as part of the Connecticut Core and to kind of get all of this audience to think a little bit about integrating academics, which is a complicated way to say, like, have fun and realize you're learning beyond school. So anyway, so let me show you some pictures. I found this of you. Ready? Emily Smith, you were once a kid too. Ha ha ha, right? Yep. Everybody in the audience, it goes by fast. It seems like yesterday I was in elementary school, and Dr. Smith and I are similar in age, and she was just a kid too. And we were enjoying summers, and now we're helping to lead summers. So it's a bit crazy. Yeah. So Emily, you want to pick up this one?
Sure. So we want you to think about summer as a time that's pretty special for kids, but also as a time where you engaged in a whole bunch of different activities as a kid, and whether you knew it or not, some of those activities were really leaving a big impact on you, either because of the adults or kids you were with, or because of the nature of the activities. So one of the things we want you to think about as you're in this module and as you're reflecting on it in the post session is, how did you spend your summers? What were the types of experiences that you had, and how were you learning even though you weren't in school?
Exactly. So the title that they gave us for this presentation and module is called Integrating Academics into Extracurricular Activities. But we realize that we at the university tend to make fancy names for things that we really want to be easier. And so we retitled this as, how to reignite the love of learning during the summer months with kids. Like, how do we make this stuff fun? How do you work with young people in whatever setting that you are assigned to just make an enjoyable experience? Yeah. I should probably say that these photographs are all come from the National Writing Project. They came and documented work that we did in Connecticut. So these are all kids that we worked with in our own summer programs. So Emily, why do you think this summer matters differently than any other summer in the past?
Yeah, so I think for all of us who just lived through both a racial and health pandemic, we are all a bit traumatized. We're all out of our element. We're all having to reconnect with people, with humans. And there was so much disruption in the year that I think kids really need to feel reconnected to and re-engaged with learning in a positive way, because this year might have not been positive for them. They may have felt isolated. They may have had mental health issues. They may have had family members who were sick. So there's a lot of trauma, but then there's the trauma of feeling like they're getting increasingly behind at school. So this summer is really important to help kids re-engage with and re-like learning. And that's the purpose of this module, is to find ways to get kids to engage with each other and the environment in ways that also help them pick up and re-engage with academic skills.
Right. And in my own work with kids and teachers during the summer, I always say that we have 4 rules, and I'm a writing guy. So it's like every day you're going to read something, every day you're going to write something, every day you're going to talk about something. But the most important thing to me is you have to have fun. If you're in my program, you got to have a good time, right? And I really am excited that not only the federal, but the state support for this work is highlighting joy, J-O-Y, because we all need to put a smile back on our faces in the work that we're doing. And I'm sure all the people in the audience here have been attending classes or doing work and labor in these digital spaces. And you too are looking for a place to put that smile back, on your noggin and focus on happiness once again. So that's kind of what we're trying to do when we say putting academics back into the program. So research, right? There's lots of research on this, and we're just justifying what we're talking about, right? And a lot of people have claimed the opportunity gaps that occur in many of our states, especially in Connecticut, where some people have completely different experiences to others because opportunities are available to them that aren't available to other people. And a lot of people have been doing research that summer programs can make a difference, especially if they're carefully planned for learning opportunities. And that's why we're talking to you, because when you are doing the work at your site locations, we hope that you will be planned and intentional with some of the instruction that you are able to provide, given whatever task your summer program assigns you. Also, we also know that summers are just key locations for knowledge acquisition. I was telling Emily when we were preparing this that, I think I learned more during the summer than in school because I was free to explore and ask questions and go to the library and figure things out for myself in ways that schools didn't allow because it was a little bit more rigid.
But I think, Brian, that I want to stop you there for a second to point something out, which is that, when we talk about summer slide, it doesn't affect every child the same way. You talked about going to the library and, exploring different things. Not all kids have that opportunity or have the motivation to do that or have the family structure to support that. So,
or you don't even realize that can help them enhance their academic achievement because libraries are a key, place to get information. Exactly.
Right. So for all those reasons, this summer experience is crucial, even more crucial now after the year that these children have had disengaged from school.
Yeah, exactly. I was telling Emily when we were having this conversation in preparation that, I do a lot of research with relocated refugee youth from the Congo and Somalia that are located in this area. And often they come with me to schools and talk to teenagers their own age about their relocated experiences. And I'm using this water theme here because I was dropping some of the kids off after a talk one day. And I said, oh, wow, you live right by Seaside Park. It's so beautiful here. It's one of the best beaches and the greatest places to walk in Connecticut. And they looked at me with a cocked head and said, what are you talking about? So I drove like 4 streets past their apartment and they were like, saw the beach and they saw the water and they saw the Long Island Sound and they saw Long Island way in the distance. They're like, we live here. And the reason why they didn't know that is because they just came into the United States and they only knew to walk from their apartment to their school, which was in the opposite direction. And they hadn't done any exploration. And so they were like super excited, like, wow, I can't believe I live this close to the ocean. This is amazing. And so it's just about, some of us grow up with, oh, we have our bicycle, go outside and play and you explore. And some of us are not given that luxury. And it's something that we need to think about. So back to the research, it's why this is important. Moving forward, we have some shared beliefs. Emily, you want to get the first one?
Sure. We feel strongly, not just as academics, but as people in this world, that a successful life is a literate life, one in which you're engaged in all the ways that literacy shows up in our lives. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in this session.
Yeah. And, like all of you who are doing this program and are being Connecticut core leaders are college students. And so you have multiple experiences, not only with K-12 subject areas, but your collegiate expertise. And so that knowledge matters and that math, science, history, languages, sports, art, music, health, technology, etc., are all valuable. And so we are doing this summer work because we're in the business of building skills with the young people that are assigned to us.
So this whole module is about that having fun is educational and all the ways in which we can engage kids in outside, inside activities that include academic and literacy skills.
Yeah, and I wrote the word whimsical learning because when I went through teacher preparation in University of Louisville and we read about Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, some people learn visually, some people learn numerically, some people learn environmentally, etc. One of the things that I realized is that I learned by laughing and by making fun of myself and having a good time. And so I always called it whimsical learning, the power of play. And I hope that you'll carry that with you in your summer placements as well.
So I need to pause 1 second, Brian. We should have said something at the beginning, so I'll just say it now. If you haven't already watched the video on place-based learning, which is kind of what we're talking about here, pause this video right now, go back, watch that video, and then come back to this slide.
That was task one of the assignment in this module. Yeah. So anyway, and it's actually kind of interesting because that last bullet there, Emily, is learning happens both in and out of school. And it's also fascinating to me that learning happens in and out of modules, right? We asked you to watch a video before coming into this, right? And we're going to ask you to watch a video after we finish. And it's sort of like learning continues. It's much more fluid than the way our first period, second period, third period, fourth period works in schools, or the way that you're assigned to 5 courses a semester in college, because you know as well as anyone else that your learning happens beyond the boundaries of a classroom too. Yeah. All right, so talk to us a little bit about, well, first of all, tell me about that. What's that picture?
Me tell you about that picture?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you know that place better than I do, I think.
Yeah, so it's a city skyline of Philly, where I grew up. And, hopefully one of the things you took away from the video is that where we live and our environment is a huge source of learning for us. There's so many ways in which we can engage with that environment. And so that's this first quote here is that we've all experienced that. We've been immersed somewhere where you grew up, whether it's a city or a very rural area. You can go outside and make it your educational landscape. So key to this philosophy is that learning can happen anytime, anywhere, and that it's too often in a classroom with a desk, but it more often can be in the environment, whether it's a city, a forest, a beach, and that hopefully by the end of this module, see all the ways in which place is ripe for learning.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions just to kind of like make this come home. So I've been to Philadelphia. I've had Philadelphia cheesesteak. I love the city. I got off of
Which one did you have? Who's
I don't know, the kind that has
matter.
steak and cheese in it and peppers.
Oh no, there's Jim's and Pat's. It's a huge debate, Brian. You can't just say you had a cheesesteak. You have to say which one you had.
What you just did and we didn't plan this, but like what you just did is prove this place-based theory kind of correct, because like I wouldn't know the variations of cheesesteaks. Like how would I know that? Because I didn't grow up in Philly. But you just had, because you grew up in that place, detailed knowledge, expertise from your personal experiences, right? And so that's kind of like what we hope you'll realize when you are in your programs this summer, that kids really have expertise of the locations and places that they know too, right? So Emily, tell me about what's a location in Philadelphia when you were a kid, and you're a twin, right? That you and your sister or you and your family, like you like to visit, like you have good memories of leaving your home and going to a place in Philly. What was it?
Well, so one was Jim's Cheesesteaks on South Street, which was a key site. But, we lived in the historical part of Philly, down where Independence Hall is, Liberty Bell, but also on the water where Penn's Landing is, where William Penn supposedly, quote, discovered Philly. So I love walking along the water there. They have lots of old ships. So there's lots that's rich there. And, as you were talking about the cheesesteaks, Brian, it made me think, my first gut reaction when you were saying, oh, I haven't tried that, is like, oh, well, I want to do a survey. I want to know who's had which cheesesteaks. And then I'm thinking like, wait, that's a perfect example of including literacy skills, survey skills, questioning skills into the activity. Like I would love to know, like, who thinks Jim's is the best? Who thinks Pat's the best? Are you a whiz steak or an American cheesesteak? Onions, no onions? Like all these ways that what's something that's so important to me can be turned into a learning activity.
I was even thinking too, like I didn't know the history of Philadelphia or the Riverway. And I didn't even know the history of like, why is Philadelphia associated with cheesesteaks? And then is there a vegetarian alternative to cheesesteaks now? And if so, what is that? And where else in the United States can you get cheesesteaks? And if you don't like
anywhere, but they're not as good.
Well, if you don't like cheesesteaks, what do you like? Oh, it's pizza. Well, and who has the best pizza? So it's constant like asking questions of young people to get their brain thinking about this world that they live in and inherit. So tell me about your own house. Like when you were a kid, you would leave or you'd go outside in the summer, whatever. Like what is something that you used to just love doing?
So I grew up right in the city. So if you went outside my house, it was a row house. There was no grass in between the houses.
Oh, wow.
All sidewalks. So my entire childhood was anything you could do on a sidewalk. Hopscotch, 7-Up wall ball. We would collect bottle caps to try to win the Coke contest to spell out the words you had to spell. We collected rubber bands and paper clips to try to make chains that would go all the way around the city block. So really the city was our playground, and that sounds cliche, but we just, whatever we found on the street is what we used to make up games. And, as a kid, I had no idea that that was actually good for me. I just enjoyed it and enjoyed being with the kids who were in the neighborhood and, whoever could come out and play.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking too, like, I was telling Emily before we started recording that when I was a kid, like, I grew up in a neighborhood where parents all worked all day long. It was a working class neighborhood in Syracuse, New York. And when it rained, like, we didn't have our bikes to ride, or we didn't have swimming pools to swim in. And so we'd probably go into each other's house and play Risk or Monopoly. And I think that's when Atari first came around. Remember Pac-Man?
Mhm.
Or, and so we would get together and do that. And I didn't realize it until I became a teacher. Like, that was a luxury. I mean, the fact that we had bicycles and that we would play wiffle ball when it was a sunny day, and to the point that we would wear the grass off in our yard and would just be dirt. And on hot days, we'd get the sprinkler system out. So the sprinkler system was keeping us cool while we played wiffle ball, and it was fun. But we were learning, because, like, we were also talking baseball. We were also talking the ways we curved the wiffle ball, the ways, the way we hit it further, those different strategies. But we were doing that unsupervised without adults, but knowledge was still occurring. Yeah.
Yep. And keeping score, keeping stats, all those things.
Yeah, and
They naturally
the rules
embedded.
of the game, the history of the game, where is the Wiffle Ball Hall of Fame? Is there a Wiffle Ball Olympics every year? Where was the Wiffle Ball invented? That's a Connecticut thing.
Yeah. So if we go back to this first quote here, I think it's really, your wiffle ball example is really great. We've all experienced the power of place, those moments when we're immersed deeply in experiencing the world around us, and what's happening there is real and meaningful. Learning in these moments is organic and visceral, right? Brian wasn't like, I'm learning about statistics in baseball. He was just living baseball, but he was actually learning the math that's associated with it. And again, that's what this module is about, is how can we create activities that we know are intentionally creating these learning moments, but for kids just feel organic and joyful.
And just thinking about, I mean, here we were 3rd through 5th grade kids, and then we learned the art of how you put your fingers over different holes on the wiffle ball, created different movements, which was physics, even though I didn't know it at the time. Or versus, like, if we taped the wiffle bat, or we didn't have a taped wiffle bat. So it's just it is interesting. And so I think the role of all the Connecticut Core this summer is just to think a little bit more teacherly, I guess you could say, or more investigatively, or more reporterly, in that you're constantly giving kids experiences, but you're also asking lots of questions, right? And engaging them in conversations about what it is that they're doing.
And getting them to love that experience, right? So that they no longer have these negative feelings about school, that it's learning is fun. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm gonna nerd out because I'm a geek, right? So I was thinking about this. I often write about theory and activity theory, and, like, why does anybody do anything, right? And so I want to give an example of running, only because I am a runner, although I'm a big guy and I run like a Mr. Potato Head with a pair of Saucony sneakers. But that's me as a person. And I run every day, try to do 5 to 10 miles, which is kind of comical, right? But the reason why I'm able to go to that outcome of running is because I have a purpose. I'm motivated. I come from the land of big people. I've always had to monitor my weight. So I run to be healthy. So I run to keep my weight down. I also run to mentally clear my mind. So I'm motivated. Kids that you're working with this summer, they're going to be their individual selves. And you're going to want them to reach an outcome, but they're not going to do that unless they have a personal motive, right? Unless they're motivated to reach that. What I love about this theory, however, is that there are also many tools that go into how you achieve these outcomes. And that's what your placement's going to be about. They might give you art supplies. They might give you a field outside. They might give you athletic equipment. They might give you the internet. It depends on where you're going. But those are going to be tools that will help you work with the kid to be motivated to reach the outcome that is desired. And then there's the divisions of labor, like who is going to do what. Your assignment is going to tell you what they want you to do. But it's also a place to empower kids to take leadership roles to reach that outcome. You will be following rules. You will be establishing rules. You will be learning rules of the environment that you're in. And I look at this as a runner, like, well, running's kind of a solo act, but there are rules of running to get, to pace yourself, to not overexhaust yourself, especially in the humidity of summer. I run better in the morning. I know my stretches that I have to do before I reach my, daily outcome. But the other thing that this is key to me, and Emily might agree or disagree, but like, I don't think any individual achieves their goal unless they're part of a larger community. And that is, I think, the number one thing that I want you to think about this summer is that when you achieve anything or you reach an outcome, you follow, you use tools, you follow rules, you probably are motivated, but what's the community that you're becoming a part of? And I emphasize that because you're going to be part of a large community this summer to help kids gain academic skills or new knowledge, even though it's not school, which is kind of a cool thing. Another part of me geeking out, and this is silly, and Emily can make fun of me, is that I do this research all the time of kids in and out of school. And I realized that you might have one activity. You might be teaching a tennis lesson this summer, right? And that's just one activity that kid is interested in. But if you also find out that that kid really loves Marvel comics, or if you really find out that he's really into graphic novels, or she's really into fashion or playing lacrosse, it helps you to teach that kid tennis or whatever that one task is, because you know the many worlds that they belong to. And so if you think about just getting to know the young people that you're working with and centering them in the middle of all of their histories and their cultures and their activities, you're going to build a relationship, and that relationship is going to make the learning that much better. And so I'm emphasizing, just when you get to your place, just know who the kids are, survey them, find out what do they love to do, find out what are their interests, so that you can use those interests to better accomplish and motivate them to reach the task that you're after. The last thing is, this is all about enhancing the lived experiences and helping them to reach new outcomes. That's what you're after in the 5 weeks this summer that you'll probably be working with them. And I'm sorry I just geeked out, but that's the nerd that I am. Thoughts, Emily? Does that make sense, or was I just like totally?
Makes sense, but like, so let's bring it down to earth for our core members, right? So they are entering their placement, they're working at the YMCA, they have a group of 15 kids with them, they're out on the playground. Give me a real world example of this theory you just talked about.
Okay, so yeah, so maybe you are doing maybe you're at a nature camp, right? And they give you nets, okay? And you got to go out into the field and you got to swoop up a bunch of insects, and then you're going to come inside of a room and you're going to dump the insects onto white paper so you can see what you caught, which is a real summer experience that I had while living in Louisville, Kentucky with kids. All right, so that's not everybody's cup of tea, right? Bugs, yuck, ew, gross. However, you could start out by, before you go out to get the bugs, you could say, who here hates bugs? Who loves bugs? What are your experiences with bugs, right? What bugs you the most, right? What do your parents do that bug you? What does your sister do that bugs you? Making that connection to their lives, like playing with the metaphors of bugs, even before you do the experience, right? Also knowing, like, oh, in your neighborhood where you're from, do you have bugs that crawl on your screen? Do you have bugs that get inside your house? What do you know? What did you learn in school about bugs? What questions do you have about bugs? Why do you think bugs even exist? So it's sort of like tapping the kids, like, what do they already know, right? Finding out, and I know that other modules have already discussed this, what do they want to know? And after you do the whatever it is that you're after in the summer, what did they learn at the end of the day, right?
And if I can jump in, Brian, like, that's a good example, because I personally hate bugs. And if you said we were going to go out and collect bugs, I would be that kid at camp that's like, ugh. But if you started by saying, what's the worst bug that you would have in your house growing up? I got lots to say about that, because we had cockroaches in my house growing up, and I could hear them at night making noise, even though I couldn't see them. But if we started that way, and then we said, all right, everyone's going to go out and find the worst bug you can possibly find right now, that would arouse the competitive spirit in me, right? So if you know something about your kids and that they're competitive, or they like to one up each other, then you've got them hooked through that, and not necessarily through the bug. Their goal is to get the grossest, ickiest bug. Name your bug, give it a personality. You can bring in drama for kids, lots of ways to make this activity engaging, given the worlds that he's just described in this activity theory model.
and just doing, one of the things we used to do with our bug studies at nature camp was we would go hike through the forest too in the same day, and we'd collect garbage that people threw, which is disgusting because people are slobs. But then we would keep it on the, we'd collect the garbage, and then we'd say, okay, using this garbage in our art supplies, can you recreate your bug? Right. It was constantly being creative. It's constantly thinking about what are new ways that we can get kids engaged with the materials that you have to work with. All right. If we were to record this again, Emily, we'd probably come up with totally different examples, but we need this module moving forward, and we hope you're following along because we didn't want to bore you too much. I tell you what,
the point is, though, you could do any activity, right, with the kids. Like we just picked bugs. You could pick kite flying or jump rope or capture the flag. Any activity has the potential to integrate questioning and literacy skills and math skills.
Yeah, that's awesome. And speaking of, that's kind of like what we had the next slide ready for you, like this kid flying a kite. So giving play space, giving activity theory, right? What about kite flying? Like, what could you do with kite flying? Here I am, I'm in the Connecticut Corps. They want me to teach kite flying tomorrow. What do I do? How would you approach that, Emily?
Well, so the first thing I would say is that I wouldn't approach it as I'm teaching kite flying. What I would tell my kids is we're going to go fly kites, right? And then we would say, wait, why is Tina's kite staying up, but Latasha's is not? What is going on here? And just get them curious about it, because that's going to happen. Some of the kids' kites are not going to go up. And then I'd say, okay, let's all freeze. What is Tina doing that's making her kite go up? Oh, well, she's got this angle going and she's thinking about the wind. So they're already engaged in physics concepts. I don't think that I would make that explicit. I would just open up the questions. And then I would say, okay, well, let's think about if we were to make a kite, what would be the features that we would have to design? And then we could go design kites, and we could, again, tap the competitive kids. Okay, who can get their kite the highest? Who can get it to stay up the longest? Why is it staying up the longest? So many skills embedded in that, and I think about, we've already talked about baseball in the former slide, but a scavenger hunt is so rich with literacy skills. If you have kids write one, there's the writing of it, there's geography and thinking about, go 20 steps to the right or north or south, turn all the way around. What do you see when you look up? What's the math that's embedded in this? And again, I love scavenger hunts. My kids love scavenger hunts. Are they thinking about the fact that they're doing GIS skills? Not at all. Do they love it? Yes, absolutely. And even thinking about kids doing, there's an activity like geocaching that's called letterboxing, where you hide little treasures around wherever your environment is, and you give people at the start clues to find them. And when you find it, you don't take the treasure, you leave a note for the next person. Again, literacy skills, but then it creates a journal so that you can see everyone's response to everyone else's, and it's amazingly fun.
Yeah, when we were putting this together, I told Emily that sometimes in a philosophy course, I might tell students, I want you to bring 5 to 10 objects just from your dorm room or from your bags or from like what you did this morning into the classroom. And we put them on our desk, and I just let everybody look around and see all those objects. And my point being that if you have a philosophy or a way of knowing in life, it comes through with what you choose to represent yourself. And so bringing just random objects and putting them on a desk tells the story about who you are. And when I was talking about it, I said, yeah, it's like a show and tell. And Dr. Smith said, well, no, or it's show, don't tell, because it's the details, and getting kids to think about the details of everything you do with them is kind of what summer enrichment's about. Right? To have fun, but also to think more critically and deeply about just random things that they might have never thought about before.
So a key for you all here watching and listening is thinking about, how do I frame the question? It's not, all right, everybody, what's the physics of kites? No one wants to talk about that. But when you ask, why is this kite staying up?
Yeah.
Then the curiosity is opened.
And again, I'm always like, well, what's the history of a kite? And then the artist in me is like, oh, if I have materials, how can I make the funkiest, craziest, most creative kite that's ever been made, right? And each kid will gravitate towards that kind of work in completely different ways, right? So there you go. Every moment, every event, every activity is right for new learning and growth. It's always asking about the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and also how. I mean, what I see for the Connecticut Corps this summer to enrich academically the summer experiences is like these core members, they just have to be professional questioners, right? They don't need to have the answers. They just need to ask questions. And then with the kids, figure out, well, what's the solution? And they do it together in a creative, kind of joyful way, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. So this summer, we know that it's an opportunity to get kids talking about new things, to build vocabulary. You may be asked to introduce new ideas, concepts, reasons, experiments, and wonders. Um, you are most likely going to be in dialogue and in many locations where you have to listen to kids, and we encourage you to do that. There's going to be team building opportunities. I know Dr. Cowell and Dr. Tolles has done an activity with you, or will be doing an activity with you about that. Building relationships with young people, that's a major goal. You'll be able to name skills, processes, behaviors, and actions. And I often tell my pre-service teachers and even in-service teachers that the best instructors are kind of coaches, right? When I was doing my research in and out of school with boys from African refugee camps, they learn more on their soccer field than they learn necessarily in school, because the coaches would give them, here's the skill we're going after. So here's some drills. Here's some things I want you to practice on the field, right? Then I'm going to let you scrimmage a little bit and play some. And then I want you to come in and reflect with me. And I'm going to give you a new skill. And I'm going to give you a new drill. It was this constant coaching and building that kind of helped the kids to grow. And in school, when teachers did that, when teachers offered skills and then drills and then opportunities to reflect, they learned, right? And some teachers were better than that than others. And so I always like to say that, like, it's not about teaching, it's about mentoring, it's about coaching, it's about facilitating. And the most important feature of all of this is to reflect. At the end of it all, you have to say, hey, Joe, what did you learn today? Right? Hey, Reese, what are you thinking about? Hey, Deb, right? What are you going to tell your parents about what happened today, right? Hey, Tony, it's this idea of like reflecting with the young people. And then you share, today I thought you all did really great with this. And one thing I'm going to try to work on tonight to be a better instructor tomorrow is this, and just kind of build that relationship through trusting one another in the reflections. Yeah. Yeah.
Rock on.
All right. So the other thing is, and I'll let you take this one because you've taught in higher ed a few more years than me, but what is literacy? Why does this even matter?
Yeah, so I think lots of kids think literacy, and actually lots of adults, is just reading books. I can read and therefore I'm literate, but we all know that it's many, many more things. And this summer is an opportunity to get kids engaged in these various ways of thinking about literacy. So it's not just reading, it's writing, it's listening, it's how we create, it's the way we put things together when we speak. Even the way what we see and how we name things is a part of literacy. Our experiences and how we communicate with other people in any of those platforms or mediums that are up there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I was thinking about that philosophically because of Paulo Freire, which you don't need to know. There's not going to be a test on this, but like, I love that he contributed to like world knowledge, that it's not just about reading the word, it's how you read the world, right? And so many individuals who are from non-text based cultures, they still are skillful, right? They might not read and write, they might not publish books, they might not do academic papers to achieve, but they know a lot, they have wisdom, and it's because they know how to read their world, right? And to live successfully in the world around them. So that's awesome. All right, so let's do it. We're going to do a little game. All right, you were talking about multiple intelligences and multiple literacies. I'm going to stop my share of this screen, I think, and I'm going to open up an art page. So it's going to be just Emily there. All right, and Emily, I'm going to go through some drawings by a guy named Richard Stein, and hopefully this is going to show up. Are you seeing Richard Stein's artwork here?
Yes.
Okay. So this is called Man Struggling with the Inability to Properly Express Himself in Words. A romantic enters the world. There's no words there. Heart frees a friend to fly. No words. Think. Still, you have to start somewhere, and asking a question is as good a place to begin as any, even if you know that silence for now is absolutely all that you will hear. This is my self-portrait. Madman emptying the ocean with a spoon, except for the great whatever gave me a fork. All right. Cat having worked very hard to get somewhere, now wondering where it is she really got. Dog enjoying a subtle sense of the miraculous. I'm being attacked by my puppy, so if you're hearing noise in the background, that's what's going on. Last one, busybodies, someone else's business. All right. Of all those pictures, which is the one that kind of like catches your attention or makes you think? Sorry.
The one that was about the friend and with the hearts.
Okay, I'm gonna go to that one. All right, so here it is.
Yeah.
Tell me what do you see there? What do you see?
What do I see, or my interpretation?
Yeah, I would just describe what you are seeing. I want to see this through your eyes. So like, what do you physically see?
So I'm seeing this heart that seems to be trapped in a jar, and that another heart comes along, and something that this heart does frees the other heart, and so it's no longer trapped.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And then there's like the yellows, and there's the reds, and there's the blues. All right. So why did this picture resonate with you?
I think because of this year that we've just had, and we've really been isolated about all the new ways that we've had to support each other. And I just think that I've really kind of revalued people and humans, and how much we rely on people, even just the small interactions that we're missing in the hallway at work, how it really helps us to just be who we are, and to do what we want, so I think that I'm particularly in tune with things like messages like this right now.
And one more question. So I see the drawing, I see how you described it, I see your interpretation. Do you have a story, or do you have a specific event from your own life where you've seen this at work?
Yeah, I mean, I think about, friends that I have at work who've, come to me and asked, for my opinion or my advice or my help, and really, sitting with them and getting them to see, like, they already have what they need, and they felt so free to just be who they are. And it wasn't about me saying something, it was me validating who they were, and hence letting them fly.
So my dog just went and got her squeaky frog toy. So that's going to be a new sound effect if you're hearing that. And that would be the dog knocking over my glass. So my point with that was basically like, you can get any visual, and there's a story, right? Art begets storytelling, just as objects do. And so it goes beyond text. Like that was colors, right? And depictions, and that helps you to elaborate your world through other means, right? And modes, which is something that we wanted to emphasize, that when you enhance summer experiences academically, that it's about telling stories with each other and sharing ideas just that are prompted by whatever it is that's at hand that you're asked to work with.
It's funny because as you say that, I'm thinking about, it's so easy to just be outside with a group of kids, and let's say you come across a tree that has a huge knot hole in it, and say, all right, I want everyone to make up a story about that knot hole, right? Tell the story of this tree, of this life, and how it got that knot hole, and what that knot hole means. And it could be anything, it could be a flagpole that has a huge scratch on it. What's the story of this scratch?
Right. Well, I like that knot hole too, because you could be like, what's inside the knot hole? What universe exists? What, like what else is, what could be beyond the knot hole? Exactly. So visual literacy matters, science literacy, historical literacy, numerical literacy. I mean, these are fractals, patterns. I love the idea that Emily said earlier about like doing surveys, doing counts, doing percentages, finding out how many people in here hate olives, right? And then putting those numbers before the kids so that they can see that numbers matter to the way we live lives anyway, and that we have conversations that are numerically based. Votes, comparisons. I also love looking at graphs, looking at tables, math proofs. And so I actually, just to kind of as a model, I got fixated last week, 2 weeks ago, on equity, diversity, and inclusivity, and how we frame it in higher ed versus how I understand it in K-12 schools. And these are all numbers from 2020. And like, I was like, well, what is the demographics of American K-12 public schools right now? And I knew it was coming, but this is the first time that it's twisted. 47% of our K-12 public schools are white and the rest are minority based. And so for the first time in American history, white populations are not the majority in our public schools. Yet in colleges and higher education, white populations remain the majority. And I was like, okay, that's maybe higher ed needs to wake up a little bit to be representative of true diversity in the United States. Well, then I did, somebody asked me like, well, what are the percentages of each race that attend college? And I was fascinated by this because this was an earlier study, 2018, was that, you see that it's a little bit more equitable in that in all populations, only a slice of the population has a college education. So that's not necessarily the norm. And I like to think about this when I'm doing my own work. And again, I'm geeking out. My point is you can bring in wherever you're assigned, whatever location, like what are the numbers of that location? Like what are things that you can think about that can help kids to process the world that they're experiencing in your care while you're working with the Connecticut Core this summer? Yeah. All right. So, Emily Smith.
Yeah. So you're all going to be in different placements and we don't know where you're going to be. You may not know where you're going to be yet. But wherever you go, whether it's a really structured program where the curriculum's given to you, or it's a more open play program, kind of supervising kids outside, think about what you can bring to that environment. Think about what kinds of questions you want to ask, or what kinds of activities you like and are good at, that you could spontaneously insert wherever you go. You're going to find in your placements that they may just trust you to figure things out, like, okay, take these 10 kids and, go at it for an hour, right? So you kind of want to have some things in your back pocket, and as much as possible to integrate the types of skills we're talking about, again, will help kids to re-engage with the academic side of their lives.
Yeah, and you are going to probably be introduced to a variety of skills that your placement wants you to achieve with. And when I was going up, 21-year-old, 22-year-old, and I worked environmental camps, and I remember the director of the place one day, he said, oh, by the way, you have 25 people coming tomorrow to learn about butterfly gardens. And I'm like, what are butterfly gardens? He goes, like flowers that butterflies like to feed on. And he goes, and you're going to take them on a hike and teach them about butterflies. And I'm like, I know nothing about that. So I had to go and like do some research. And I the next day I taught myself about butterflies, and I taught myself about butterfly gardens. And guess what? I was instructing everybody about how to grow a wonderful butterfly garden in 24 hours. And so that's just, that's just an example.
You can do it.
Yeah. So in your placements, I'm going to pull all these up. You all have talents because you're coming in with multiple experiences and you're coming in from higher education. So you might want to kind of like list out some of the skills that you could offer no matter where you are placed. Like, oh, I'm really athletic. Oh, I'm really artsy. I have such great musical talent. I can sing with kids, right? And let your placements know what talents you have. And you might also want to think about, like, would you bring in reading? Would you bring in writing opportunities, thinking opportunities, creative opportunities? And no matter where you are, like, how could I use math? Or where's the science in all this? Or what's the history in this? And how can I help enhance the program, right? You good? Ready to go on?
Yep.
All right, so go up.
I'll take this one. All right, so as soon as this video is over, which will be in a couple minutes, we have a few slides left. This is an activity we would like you to do, so you'll need to come back to this slide in a few minutes, because we're not going to have you do this until we finish, is to practice what we've been talking about. Pick an audience. You could be a group of 5-year-olds, it could be 20 middle schoolers, it could be at a YMCA, it could be in the middle of Hartford, in the city, right? Figure out what your audience is, what your context is, and design an activity that incorporates some of the academic skills that we've been talking about. Think about what materials would you need. And sometimes it's nothing. If it's the activity of tell the story of this tree, they just need to be able to speak and sit on the ground and look at the tree. So don't try to think of things that require lots of materials that you're going to not have, right? So think as creatively as you can with what you can do in the environment, which is why we're really focused on place. There are materials in the places you are, just in the natural habitat. So think about that.
Yeah, I think about, some of the young people from Sudan and Kakuma refugee camp that I've worked with, who, when they had lessons taught to them each day, they would teach the oldest kid the lesson, and then that oldest kid would go down to the younger kids and teach the lesson, and those younger kids would go down and teach the lesson to even younger kids. But they did not have pens, they did not have pencils, they did not have paper. They used their finger and they used the sand in the soil, right? And that's how they taught one another. And so they just replicated the lessons and passed it on forward. And when you were just giving that example, Emily, I was thinking about, like, all right, you're assigned tomorrow, everybody's going to draw a stick figure. Okay, well, what's a stick figure? All right. How would I do that? Well, I think it's going to take 10 minutes to model how to do a wonderful stick figure for kids. But then you can say, what are some odd ways that we can change the stick figure to make it look like it's doing different things? And if we don't have pencils, why don't we all run outside? Everybody's got to collect 20 sticks, right? And can you recreate a stick figure, pun intended, with the sticks that you find, right? So it's about thinking about the tasks that you have to do and what would you need to make that happen, and also thinking about, like, oh yeah, I can teach everybody how to pucker their lips and make a fish face. Well, if you're going to do that in instruction, how would you do it? What questions would you ask? How would you model it? What materials would you need? You just need your face and your hands. So it's just that kind of task. Yeah, I'm a lover of top tens, and I can tell that we're getting close to the end of this recording because this little 1-year-old puppy dog is going spastic. I'm going to throw all of these up. Emily, you want to read them as we go?
Sure. So things to keep in mind as you're thinking about the activities that you're going to be doing with kids. So keep a learning goal in mind. What is it you want kids to get out of this, right? Obviously, they're having fun, they're engaging, they're meeting new friends, but academically, what's your learning goal? You want to alternate? Go ahead.
Yeah, vocabulary. I mean, I tell everybody that I'm in the market of pushing words, right? And this is even, I teach graduate students, right? I teach in-practice teachers, and I'm always like, it's vocabulary, vocabulary, vocabulary. And what's so beautiful about our population in the United States is a lot of our kids speak multiple languages and are bilingual, trilingual, and I love it. And I like say, you teach them whatever vocabulary you're emphasizing, but then they can teach you how to say it in the languages that they know, because then everybody's smarter in the end. Yeah. That was the one. I already did this one. That was my whole idea of skill, drill, scrimmage, reflect, play, reflect. Think about the skills you want kids to do. Think about activities that they can do. Think about letting them play, coming in, reflecting, doing it all over again. That's what I was talking about.
We've already talked about it, but laughter, get kids happy, engaged, whimsical learning while they're learning.
Yeah, and I mean, you may think this is corny, but if you download 4th grade jokes and you just have a bunch of them and you tell jokes, you're going to build a good rapport with kids, because everybody loves corny dad jokes, even though they claim that they don't.
Yeah, and a great activity is bring your best joke to the circle.
Yeah.
And rate who got the best laugh from their joke.
Yeah.
Of creativity.
Yeah.
Always giving kids opportunities to think outside the box, to create, to recreate, to think creatively, to both with their mind and with their hands.
Yeah. And then always, if you're going to make kids, or you're going to be asked to have kids do something, you're going to want to model it. And so you might get an assignment like, tomorrow, John, we want you to do this. You might want to consider practicing it at home to figure out how can you model it for the young people you're working with. And if your model isn't perfect, maybe you can choose somebody else to model it for you or model it with you, or you could choose special guests to come in and help you out. That always works as well.
As Brian talked about a little earlier, as much as possible, connecting it to the personal. Do you like bugs? What bugs do you have in your life?
What bugs you?
What bugs you, right? So connected to who they are as people. The more you build that relationship and the connection with kids, the more you will have them, the more they will be available to you to learn, because they're with you. You've hooked them in. You can't just start with the activity. You have to start with the child. Get them first, then the activity.
Yeah. And I always, like, we've been talking about asking lots of questions during our dialogue. But it's always listening, like hearing what other people are saying, or hearing what kids have to contribute so that you can guide them. That's very, very important.
And then, as we've been talking about, connecting this in and out of school knowledge, helping them to see that what they're learning in the classroom is also happening in their environment. And, You don't have to always name it, but help them to see, you know, this is all the same stuff. We're talking about why things fly outside and inside.
And then always, I'm all about this positive energy all the time. High fives, daps, thumbs up, applause, finger snaps, waves, anything to keep the kids kind of like together, motivated, and feeling really great about their summer experiences. So what we have done for this module is we wanted to kind of get you thinking about teaching, thinking about instruction, thinking about ways you could, you know, tie academics into the everyday. That our next task that we want you to do when you get off of this video is just to listen to a 10-minute commencement speech by Jason Reynolds, who's a YA author, young adult author. It's probably one of the best 10-minute commencement speeches I've ever heard, because it really got me to think. And so I want you, when you watch it, like, think about how the teacher impacted his thinking as a student. And then he tells a fish tale, but Jason Reynolds takes that fish tale and makes us think about a larger message. And then I just really am curious about your reactions to the speech. And you're going to have an opportunity to talk to one another about what you thought about that. Because we've also designed what's called a dialogue booklet. And these are, usually I would cut them up and I would staple together so you'd go question by question. But we can't do this because of COVID, and we're still in digital spaces. So what we did is we created 10 open-ended questions to inspire a conversation. It's an icebreaker of sorts. We want you to go deep with your thinking and to listen to one another and how one another responds. And just kind of like keep notes of how did you respond to this question? How did others respond to it? Because through the conversation, you're going to get closer to being a Connecticut Core member of solidarity, of high performance, of excellence this summer, because you're all in this together.
So when you come back for your synchronous session with your facilitator, that's when you will do the dialogue book. But we want you to just preview the questions so you have a heads up as to what's coming after you watch the graduation video.
Yeah, and your facilitator, as they guide that dialogue, will realize with you that all those questions are really intended to help you move forward with the goals of this week and how you can be better suited for your placements. So thank you for listening to our module today. Emily and I have worked together for 11 years, but we've never really had an opportunity to ever collaborate like we just did on this video. And so we'll be doing some reflection ourselves, I'm sure, once we hit stop.
And if you feel like you missed us and want to come back, we're at Fairfield U. We'd love to see you. Thank you all.
You can
go off to your final tasks and have a great time this summer.
Yeah, we wish you the best. Take care.